When my cousin Jennifer leaned over to whisper something to her husband, and they both glanced at me before bursting into muffled laughter, I knew exactly what this Thanksgiving dinner was going to be like. I stood in the doorway of my Aunt Margaret's spacious home in Westchester County, New York, holding a homemade pumpkin pie that suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The November cold had painted my cheeks red, but the chill I felt now came from inside that warm, beautifully decorated house. Through the large windows, I could see the dining room already set with fine china, crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier, and my family members mingling with drinks in their hands. I hadn't wanted to come. 3 months had passed since I'd seen most of them, and in that time, I'd gained more weight. The stress, the sleepless nights, the fast food eaten at odd hours because there was simply no time for anything else. My scrubs had gotten tighter, my face rounder, and I knew what they would see. Not me, just the fat. My mother opened the door before I could ring the bell. Her smile was warm, but her eyes did that thing they always did now. A quick scan from head to toe, a flicker of something, disappointment maybe, concern perhaps, before she pulled me into a hug. "Come in, sweetheart. You must be freezing." The house smelled like roasted turkey, cinnamon, and judgment. I could feel it the moment I stepped inside. My Uncle Robert was the first to approach, his belly straining against his button-down shirt, which made the irony almost laughable. "There she is," he boomed, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a performance for everyone watching. "You're looking well fed." The room fell into that terrible kind of laughter where everyone pretends it's funny, but everyone knows it's cruel. I forced a smile. The same smile I'd perfected over the years, the one that said I was in on the joke even though I was the joke. I made my way to the kitchen where Aunt Margaret was basting the turkey, her perfectly fitted dress showing off the figure she maintained through what she called discipline, but what I knew was an unhealthy obsession with the scale. "Oh, honey," she said, barely looking at me. "You brought pie? We already have 3 desserts. Maybe we should save it for later?" The translation was clear. We don't need more food, especially not food brought by someone who clearly eats too much of it. I set the pie down on the counter, next to the array of dishes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Through the kitchen window, I could see my cousin Jennifer in the living room, her hand resting on her flat stomach, recently returned to its pre-baby shape thanks to a personal trainer and a nanny that gave her time for 2-hour gym sessions. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, seeing a message from the hospital. My chest tightened. Not now, not tonight. I quickly typed a response and slipped the phone back into my pocket. "Everyone, dinner is ready!" Aunt Margaret called out. We gathered around the table, a long mahogany piece that seated 14 people comfortably. I found myself positioned between my teenage nephew Kyle, who couldn't stop scrolling through his phone, and my grandmother, who was hard of hearing and wouldn't notice most of the conversations anyway. As we passed dishes around, my Uncle Robert started talking about his recent promotion. Then Jennifer talked about her daughter's acceptance into a prestigious preschool. My brother mentioned his marathon training. Everyone had something to share, something that proved their worth, their success, their place in the world. "And what about you, Sarah?" my aunt asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Still working at the hospital?" "Yes," I replied simply. "Still doing the night shifts?" "Sometimes. Must be hard to maintain a healthy lifestyle with those hours," my cousin Michael chimed in. He was a CrossFit instructor, naturally. I read that night shift workers have a harder time managing their weight, something about circadian rhythms and metabolism. The table went quiet for a moment. Everyone was looking at me now, forks suspended in mid-air. "I'm managing just fine," I said, cutting into my turkey with more force than necessary. Jennifer leaned forward, her voice taking on that concerned tone that wasn't concern at all. "You know, Sarah, I've been using this amazing app. It tracks everything you eat, and it's been so helpful. I could send you the link if you want. It might help you, get back on track." Back on track. As if I'd derailed. As if my body was a train wreck that needed fixing. "I appreciate the thought, but I'm good." "Mom," Kyle suddenly said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Why is Aunt Sarah so fat?" The table erupted. My mother gasped. Aunt Margaret scolded Kyle. My brother tried to change the subject, but the damage was done. The question everyone had been thinking all night had finally been spoken aloud by a 13-year-old with no filter. "Kyle, that's incredibly rude," Jennifer said, but I could see the smile she was suppressing. I set down my fork. My hands were shaking, not from anger exactly, but from something deeper. Years of this. Years of being the family disappointment. The one who didn't fit the mold. The one who wasn't thin, wasn't married, didn't have the life everyone expected. "It's okay," I said quietly. "No, it's not okay," my mother said. "Kyle, apologize to your aunt." "Sorry," Kyle muttered, not looking up from his phone. The dinner continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. Conversations became more fragmented, more awkward. I ate my food mechanically, tasting nothing, feeling the weight of every glance, every whispered comment I couldn't quite hear but could definitely imagine. When dessert was served, my pie remained in the kitchen, forgotten or deliberately ignored. Jennifer brought out a flourless chocolate cake, announcing proudly that it was low sugar and gluten-free. "I have to watch what I eat now," she said, patting her stomach. "Baby weight is so hard to lose. Though some people have it harder than others, I suppose." She glanced at me when she said it. Just a quick look, but it was enough. My phone buzzed again. This time, when I checked it, my face must have changed because my mother noticed. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" "I need to make a call," I said, standing up. "Excuse me." I walked out to the front porch, the November air biting at my skin. My hands trembled as I dialed the number, and when the voice on the other end answered, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "Yes," I said. "I'll be there in 40 minutes." I ended the call and stood there for a moment, looking at the warm glow of the house behind me, hearing the muffled sounds of laughter and conversation. They had no idea. Not a single one of them had any idea. When I walked back inside, I went straight to the living room where everyone had gathered for coffee. "I have to go," I announced. "Already?" Aunt Margaret said. "We haven't even had time to catch up properly. It's important." "More important than family?" my Uncle Robert asked, and I could hear the judgment in his voice. I looked around the room at these people, my family, who had spent the entire evening making me feel small, invisible, worthless. And I realized that I'd been protecting them. I'd been carrying a secret, shouldering a burden, sacrificing everything. And they had no idea because all they could see was my body. "Yes," I said simply. "It is. Before you find out what happens next, I need your help. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I'd absolutely love to know how far this story reaches. Your support means everything. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming in the next chapter. The truth is about to shake everything." The drive to Manhattan Memorial Hospital took exactly 38 minutes. I made it in 32. The parking garage was nearly empty at this hour, most of the day shift long gone, the evening visitors having left after their allotted times. I knew this place in the dark better than I knew it in the light. The fluorescent hallways, the smell of antiseptic mixed with bad coffee, the sound of machines beeping in steady rhythms that either meant everything was fine or everything was falling apart. I changed in the staff locker room, pulling on my scrubs, the same ones that had gotten tighter over the past months. As I tied my hair back, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My face was fuller, yes, but it was also exhausted. Dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. Cheeks that had rounded out from stress eating and irregular meals grabbed between emergencies. "Dr. Chen," one of the nurses called out as I walked toward the surgical wing. "We didn't think you'd make it in time." "Traffic was light," I said. "What's the situation?" 8-year-old female, multiple trauma from a car accident. Parents are en route, but she's crashing. Dr. Morrison is scrubbing in, but he requested you specifically. My heart rate picked up, not from anxiety, but from that familiar rush of purpose. This was why I was here. This was why everything else faded away. "I'll be right there." The surgical suite was bright and cold, everyone moving with practiced efficiency. The little girl on the table looked so small, so fragile, surrounded by machines and tubes and people in blue gowns trying to save her life. "Talk to me," I said, approaching the table. Dr. Morrison, a senior trauma surgeon who had been my mentor for the past 5 years, looked up. His eyes crinkled above his mask in what I knew was a smile of relief. "Glad you're here, Chen. We've got a ruptured spleen, possible liver laceration, and she's losing blood faster than we can replace it. I need your hands." For the next 3 hours, nothing else existed. Not the dinner, not the comments, not the looks. Just this child, this life hanging in the balance, and my hands working with absolute precision to repair what had been broken. "Suction," I said calmly. "More light here. Watch that bleeder." The surgery was delicate, complicated, the kind that required years of training and a steady nerve. My fingers moved with practiced skill, every stitch exact, every decision calculated. I was aware of Dr. Morrison watching me, assessing, though he'd long since stopped questioning my abilities. "Beautiful work, Chen," he murmured as I completed a particularly difficult anastomosis. "Absolutely beautiful." When we finally closed, when the monitors showed stable vitals and the immediate danger had passed, I felt that familiar wave of exhaustion mixed with satisfaction. We'd done it. She would live. In the scrub room, as I washed the blood from my hands, Dr. Morrison stood beside me. "You're one of the best residents I've ever trained," he said. "That fellowship offer from Johns Hopkins, have you thought about it?" "I'm still considering my options. Don't wait too long. They want an answer by December. And Sarah," he paused, using my first name, which he rarely did. "Take care of yourself. I know you're working doubles, picking up extra shifts. The hours are brutal in this specialty, but you can't pour from an empty cup. I'll be fine." That's what everyone says until they're not. I changed back into my regular clothes and checked my phone. 17 missed calls, 12 text messages, all from family members. The first voicemail was from my mother. "Sarah, what happened? You just left. Everyone is worried." The second was from Aunt Margaret. "That was incredibly rude, young lady. We invited you into our home and you couldn't even stay for dessert." The third was from Jennifer. "Just wanted to make sure you're okay. Sorry if Kyle upset you. Kids, you know?" I deleted them all without listening to the rest. It was nearly midnight when I finally left the hospital. The city was quieter now, the streets less crowded, the sky that particular shade of dark that only comes in the early morning hours. I stopped at a 24-hour diner, the kind with cracked vinyl seats and coffee that tastes like it's been sitting for 6 hours because it has. The waitress, a woman named Dolores, who I'd gotten to know over the past year of late-night stops, smiled when she saw me. "The usual, honey? Please." She brought me scrambled eggs, toast, and bacon, food that was terrible for me and exactly what I needed. I ate slowly, watching the occasional taxi pass by outside, thinking about the little girl who would wake up tomorrow with no memory of how close she'd come to not waking up at all. My phone buzzed. Another message from my mother. "Please call me, I'm worried." I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "I'm fine, had to work. We'll talk later." The response came immediately. "Work? On Thanksgiving night? Sarah, you missed the whole evening for work?" I didn't reply. How could I explain to her that I hadn't missed anything important? That the real work, the work that mattered, was what I'd just spent 3 hours doing? That saving a life was worth more than enduring another evening of judgment disguised as concern? When I got home to my small apartment in Queens, it was after 1 in the morning. The place was quiet, neat in that way that spaces are when someone is rarely home. I kicked off my shoes and collapsed onto the couch, too tired to even make it to the bedroom. My laptop sat on the coffee table, still open to the last thing I'd been researching, a new surgical technique for pediatric trauma. Beside it was a stack of medical journals, pages marked with sticky notes, passages highlighted in yellow and pink. On the wall across from me hung my medical degree from Columbia, my residency certificate, a photo of me receiving an award for outstanding achievement in surgical research. None of my family had come to that ceremony. They'd been busy. There was always something more important. I thought about Kyle's question at dinner. Why is Aunt Sarah so fat? What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was why. They saw the weight gain and assumed laziness, lack of discipline, letting myself go. They didn't see the 70-hour work weeks, the meals skipped or eaten standing up in a hospital hallway, the stress that made my body hold onto every calorie like it might be the last. The choice I made every single day to sacrifice sleep, health, and personal comfort to become the best trauma surgeon I could be. They didn't know that 6 months ago, I'd been offered a position at a prestigious hospital in California with a significant salary increase. I'd turned it down because my mother needed me closer to home after her cancer diagnosis. They didn't know I'd been paying her medical bills, the ones insurance didn't cover, which was why I drove a 10-year-old Honda and lived in a tiny apartment instead of somewhere nicer. They didn't know that the weight they mocked, the body they judged, belonged to someone who held lives in her hands. Someone who made split-second decisions that meant the difference between a child going home to their family or a family planning a funeral. But they would know. Soon enough, they would all know. My phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but when I saw it was Dr. Morrison, I picked up. "Chen," he said, his voice serious. "I just got off the phone with the hospital board. They want to meet with you next week." "About?" "The chief of pediatric trauma surgery position. Dr. Rodriguez is retiring in January. They're considering you for the role." I sat up straight, my exhaustion forgotten. That position was what I'd been working toward for 5 years, the youngest person ever to be considered for it. It would mean leading a department, teaching residents, shaping the future of pediatric trauma care. "I'm only 32, I said, "and you're the best surgeon I've seen in 20 years. Age is just a number, Chen. Skill is what matters." After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, letting the news sink in. Chief of Pediatric Trauma Surgery at Manhattan Memorial Hospital, one of the top programs in the country. I thought about my family, gathered around that table, laughing at me, judging me, reducing me to nothing more than my body size. And I realized that I'd been waiting for their approval, their validation, their acceptance. I'd been carrying their judgment like it meant something, but it didn't. It never had. The only validation I needed was from the families whose children I saved, from the colleagues who respected my work, from the little girl who would wake up tomorrow and eventually grow up to live a full life because my hands had been steady and my mind had been sharp. I pulled out my laptop and began drafting an email, not to my family, not yet, but to Johns Hopkins, to inquire about that fellowship they'd offered. Because maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop making my life smaller, to accommodate people who would never see me for who I truly was. Outside my window, the city continued its endless rhythm. Somewhere, a siren wailed. Somewhere, another emergency was unfolding. Somewhere, someone needed a surgeon with steady hands and a strong heart. That was me. That had always been me. And they had no idea. The call came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after Thanksgiving. I was in the middle of rounds, checking on post-operative patients, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Is this Dr. Sarah Chen?" "Yes. Who's calling?" "This is Rebecca Martinez from the New York Times Health section. I'm writing a feature on young surgeons making significant contributions to trauma medicine, and your name came up repeatedly in my research. Would you be willing to sit down for an interview?" I stood in the hospital hallway, doctors and nurses moving past me, the familiar sounds of the ward creating a backdrop to this unexpected moment. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for that kind of article," I said. "Dr. Morrison speaks very highly of you. So does Dr. Patel at Johns Hopkins. And I've been looking at your publication record, your surgical outcomes, the new technique you developed for pediatric spleen injuries. You're exactly the right person." We scheduled the interview for Friday afternoon. I didn't tell anyone, not my colleagues, not my family, especially not my family. That evening, my mother called. Her voice was strained, the way it got when she was trying very hard to sound casual about something that wasn't casual at all. "Your Aunt Margaret's birthday party is this Saturday," she said. "Please tell me you're coming. I'm working. Sarah, you missed Thanksgiving dessert. You barely said hello to anyone. People are starting to talk. Let them talk." There was a long pause. Then, "Why are you being like this?" I wanted to laugh. After 32 years, after every comment, every disappointed look, every family gathering where I was treated as less than, she was asking why I was being like this. "I have to go, Mom." Patient waiting. I hung up before she could respond. Friday arrived with unseasonable warmth for December. The interview was scheduled at a cafe near the hospital, neutral territory. Rebecca Martinez was younger than I expected, maybe late 20s, with sharp eyes and a recorder that she placed on the table between us. "Let's start with the basics," she said. "You graduated from Columbia Medical School at the top of your class, completed your residency at Manhattan Memorial, and you're currently being considered for Chief of Pediatric Trauma Surgery. That's an extraordinary trajectory for someone your age. I've worked hard. Your colleagues say it's more than hard work. They say you have an instinct for trauma surgery, that you see solutions others miss. Dr. Morrison told me about the 8-year-old from Thanksgiving night. He said you saved her life when he wasn't sure anyone could. I was just doing my job." She smiled. "You're very modest, but your record speaks for itself. 43 pediatric trauma surgeries in the past year, 0 mortality rate, several innovative techniques that are now being taught to other residents. Yet you maintain a low profile. No social media presence, very few public appearances. Why is that?" I looked out the window at the people passing by, living their ordinary lives, unaware that just blocks away, life and death decisions were being made every hour. "Because the work isn't about me," I said finally. "It's about the patients, the families. A parent shouldn't have to know my name or see my face. They should just know that when their child needs help, someone skilled will be there. That's a beautiful sentiment. But don't you think you deserve recognition for what you do? Recognition doesn't save lives. Skill does." We talked for another hour. She asked about my background, my training, my philosophy on medicine. I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't expected, talking about the responsibility of holding someone's life in your hands, the weight of making decisions when there's no time to doubt, the privilege of being trusted with someone's most precious gift, their child. "One more question," she said as we were wrapping up. "What keeps you going? The hours are brutal. The stress is enormous. The stakes are life and death. What makes you keep choosing this every day?" I thought about that little girl from Thanksgiving night, how I'd checked on her every day since, how yesterday she'd been awake enough to smile at me, to squeeze my hand, how her parents had cried and thanked me over and over, and how I'd felt that familiar tightness in my chest that came from knowing I'd made a difference. "Because someone has to," I said, "and I'm good at it. Maybe the best thing I'll ever be good at is holding a scalpel steady when everything else is chaos. If that's my purpose, then I'm grateful for it." The article was scheduled to run the following Wednesday. I didn't think much about it until my phone started ringing at 6 in the morning. The first call was from Dr. Morrison. "Chen, have you seen the Times?" The second was from a colleague. "Your front page of the health section." The third was from my mother. "Sarah, what on earth?" I pulled up the article on my phone, still in bed, my hair a mess, wearing the oversized t-shirt I slept in. The headline read, "The Surgeon Who Works in the Shadows. Meet Dr. Sarah Chen, Saving Young Lives One Emergency at a Time." But it was the photo that stopped me cold. They'd sent a photographer to the hospital without telling me, and he'd captured me in the hallway after a surgery, still in my scrubs, my hair pulled back, exhaustion evident on my face. But there was something else too, a kind of quiet determination, a strength. The article was detailed, professional, and glowing. It talked about my achievements, my surgical innovations, the lives I'd saved. It mentioned that I was being considered for chief at one of the nation's top trauma centers. It included quotes from colleagues calling me exceptional, brilliant, the future of pediatric trauma surgery. It didn't mention my weight, not once. By noon, my phone had exploded. Texts, calls, emails. Some from colleagues congratulating me. Some from medical students asking for advice. Some from other hospitals. Recruiters wondering if I'd consider positions elsewhere. And then, the family messages started rolling in. Jennifer. OMG. Sarah, I had no idea you were such a big deal. Uncle Robert. Very impressive, kiddo. Your father would be proud. Aunt Margaret. We should have a party to celebrate this Saturday at my house. Kyle. My friends think it's cool that my aunt is in the newspaper. I read through them all, each message a small knife, not because they were cruel, but because they were kind. Now they were kind. Now they were proud. Now they saw me. But where had they been every other day of my life? My mother called again. This time I answered. Sarah, honey, I don't understand. Why didn't you tell us? Tell you what? About everything. The chief position, the fellowship offers, all of it. We had no idea you were accomplishing so much. I sat at my kitchen table, looking at the medical journals stacked there, at the notes from surgeries, at the life I'd built in silence. You never asked, I said quietly. That's not fair. Isn't it? Mom, I've been working 70-hour weeks for 5 years. I've been doing groundbreaking research, saving lives, building a career. And every time I saw the family, all anyone could talk about was my weight, my body, how I looked. Not once did anyone ask about my work. I heard her sharp intake of breath. We were concerned about your health. Were you? Or were you embarrassed? The silence that followed was answer enough. I'm coming to Aunt Margaret's party on Saturday, I said. And we're going to talk. All of us. Because some things need to be said. I spent the rest of the week preparing. Not for surgery, but for something almost as daunting, confronting my family with the truth they'd been too blind to see. On Saturday evening, I drove back to Westchester County. The weather had turned cold again, snow threatening in the heavy clouds overhead. I wore jeans and a sweater, nothing fancy, my hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. I looked exactly like I had at Thanksgiving, except this time I carried the New York Times article folded in my purse. When I walked in, the atmosphere was different. People stopped talking when they saw me. Jennifer rushed over, suddenly wanting to hug me, to take selfies together. Uncle Robert boomed about how proud he was, as if he hadn't made fat jokes just 2 weeks ago. Aunt Margaret had prepared my favorite foods, as if that would erase the forgotten pie. I let them fuss for a few minutes. Then I asked everyone to sit down in the living room. They complied, probably expecting me to give some humble speech about gratitude and family. Instead, I pulled out the article and set it on the coffee table. I want to talk about Thanksgiving, I said. The room went quiet. Jennifer's smile faltered. My mother looked nervous. 2 weeks ago, I sat at that dinner table and listened to jokes about my weight. I heard comments about my lifestyle, my health, my body. A 13-year-old boy asked why I was fat, and instead of addressing the cruelty of that question, most of you laughed or made excuses. Sarah, Aunt Margaret started, but I held up my hand. I left that dinner early because I got a call from the hospital. An 8-year-old girl had been in a car accident. She was dying. I spent the next 3 hours performing surgery, repairing her spleen and liver, stopping internal bleeding, saving her life. That's why I left. That's why I'm often unavailable. That's why I work holidays and miss family events. Because I'm a trauma surgeon, and when someone is dying, I don't get to say no. Jennifer's face had gone pale. Kyle looked down at his hands. I've gained weight over the past 2 years. You're right about that. I gained it because I work 70-hour weeks. Because I eat when I can, sleep when I can, and sacrifice my personal comfort for my patients. I gained it because I've been paying Mom's cancer treatment bills, which is why I drive an old car and live in a small apartment. I gained it because stress and exhaustion do things to your body, and I chose to prioritize keeping people alive over keeping myself thin. My mother's eyes filled with tears. I continued. None of you knew that because none of you asked. In 5 years, not one person at a family gathering has asked about my work, my research, my achievements. All you saw was my body. All you judged was my appearance. And you know what? That says a lot more about you than it does about me. Uncle Robert cleared his throat. We didn't know, Sarah. We had no idea you were doing such important work. Would it have mattered? I asked. Should I have to save lives to deserve respect? Should I have to be featured in the New York Times before you stop making jokes about my weight? What about all the people who don't have impressive careers but who are still worthy of dignity and kindness? No one had an answer. I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad, I said, my voice softer now. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand something. I spent years trying to earn your approval, trying to be good enough, thin enough, successful enough. And I finally realized that your approval isn't worth having if it's conditional on me meeting your standards of appearance. I'm going to be named Chief of Pediatric Trauma Surgery at Manhattan Memorial in January. I'm also considering a fellowship at Johns Hopkins. My career is taking off in ways I'd always dreamed about. And I'm doing it at this size, in this body, because my worth as a surgeon has nothing to do with how I look. I stood up, preparing to leave. If you want to be part of my life going forward, I need you to see me. The real me. Not the body you want me to have, but the person I actually am. Otherwise, I think it's better if we keep our distance. Sarah, wait, my mother said, standing up. She crossed the room and took my hands. I'm so sorry. You're right. About all of it. I was so worried about your health that I forgot to see your happiness, your success, your incredible achievements. I've been a terrible mother. You haven't been terrible, I said, and I meant it. You've been human. You've been influenced by a society that tells us a woman's value is in her appearance. But I need you to do better. I need all of you to do better. Around the room, I saw faces reflecting shame, understanding, regret. Kyle spoke up, his voice small. I'm really sorry, Aunt Sarah. What I said was mean. I walked over and sat beside him. You're 13. You're learning. But I want you to remember this. You never know what someone is going through. You never know what they're sacrificing, what they're achieving, what battles they're fighting. So before you judge someone's body, before you comment on how they look, ask yourself if you really know their story. He nodded, and I could see he genuinely understood. The rest of the evening was different. People asked me about my work, about the surgeries, about what it was like to save lives. Jennifer apologized tearfully, admitting she'd been jealous of my career while she felt stuck in the suburbs. Uncle Robert shared that he'd struggled with weight himself and had been projecting his own insecurities. Aunt Margaret talked about the pressure she felt to look perfect and how exhausting it was. We were being real with each other, maybe for the first time. When I finally left that night, it was late and snow had begun to fall. My mother walked me to my car. I'm really proud of you, she said. Not because of the article or the job, but because of who you are. You're compassionate and strong, and you stand up for what matters. That's who your father and I raised, and somewhere along the way, I forgot to tell you that. I hugged her, and for the first time in years, it felt genuine. Driving home through the snow, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The years of studying, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the judgments endured and overcome. I thought about the little girl who was now recovering, who would go home to her family because I'd been there when she needed me. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Morrison. Board meeting confirmed for Monday. They want to offer you the position. Congratulations, Chief Chen. I smiled, and it was the first real smile I'd had in weeks. They'd laughed at me for being fat at a family dinner. They'd judged me, dismissed me, reduced me to a body that didn't meet their standards. But I'd proven that my worth wasn't measured by their approval. It was measured by the lives I touched, the people I saved, the difference I made in the world. And that was something no one could ever take away. Okay, I need to know. Did this chapter hit you in the feels? Are you Team Sarah all the way? Drop a comment telling me how you would have handled this situation. Would you have been as calm as Sarah, or would you have walked out and never looked back? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And hey, if someone you know needs to hear this story, share this video with them. Sometimes we all need a reminder that our worth isn't measured by how we look. The Monday morning meeting with the hospital board was scheduled for 10 o'clock. I arrived 30 minutes early, sitting in my car in the parking garage, watching the digital clock tick closer to the moment that would define my career. My phone had been buzzing all weekend with messages of support. Colleagues, former professors, even patients' families who had somehow gotten my number. The New York Times article had sparked something bigger than I'd anticipated. Other publications had reached out. A medical podcast wanted to interview me. Someone from Good Morning America had left a voicemail. But none of that mattered as much as this meeting. At 9:55, I walked into the administrative wing of Manhattan Memorial. The receptionist smiled warmly at me, a change from her usual professional distance. She'd read the article too. They're ready for you, Dr. Chen. Conference room B. Inside, 7 people sat around a large table. The hospital CEO, the chief of surgery, 3 board members, the head of human resources, and Dr. Morrison. They all stood when I entered, which felt both respectful and slightly intimidating. Dr. Chen, the CEO, a silver-haired woman named Dr. Patricia Hoffman, began. "Thank you for meeting with us. Please sit." I took the empty chair at the end of the table, my hands folded in my lap to keep them from shaking. "I'll get right to the point," Dr. Hoffman continued. "Dr. Rodriguez is retiring at the end of January. We need someone to lead our pediatric trauma department, someone who embodies excellence in surgical skill, teaching ability, and leadership. After extensive review of qualified candidates, the board has unanimously agreed that you are that person." She slid a folder across the table toward me. "We'd like to offer you the position of Chief of Pediatric Trauma Surgery, effective February 1st. The terms are outlined in this contract. We believe the compensation and benefits reflect the significance of this role." I opened the folder, scanning the documents. The salary was substantial, more than I'd been making by a considerable margin. There were research funds, a budget for departmental development, teaching responsibilities, and the authority to shape the program's direction. "This is an incredible opportunity," I continuer 1213 said carefully. "But I need to be honest with you about something." The room went quiet. "Doctor?" Morrison's eyebrows raised slightly. "I've also been approached by Johns Hopkins about a fellowship. It's a chance to further specialize, to work with some of the top minds in pediatric trauma. I need time to consider both options carefully." Dr. Hoffman nodded. "We're aware of the Hopkins offer. We expected you'd want to consider it. Take a week. But I want you to understand what you'd be building here, Sarah. This program could become the best in the country with you leading it. You wouldn't just be treating patients. You'd be training the next generation of trauma surgeons. You'd be conducting research that saves lives beyond the ones on your table. That's a different kind of impact." She was right, and I knew it. Still, I needed time to think. "I'll have an answer for you by next Monday," I said. "That's all we ask." As I left the meeting, Dr. Morrison caught up with me in the hallway. "Walk with me," he said. We made our way to the cafeteria, grabbed coffee, and found a quiet corner away from the lunch crowd. "What are you really hesitating about?" he asked. "I don't know if I'm ready to lead. I'm 32. Some of the surgeons I'd be supervising are 20 years older than me. Age is irrelevant. You know what matters? When that little girl was bleeding out on Thanksgiving, did you hesitate? No. When you developed that new technique for splenic repair, did you doubt yourself? I worked through the doubts." "Exactly. Leadership isn't about being fearless, Sarah. It's about working through the fear and making the right call anyway. You do that every day in the OR. This is just a different kind of surgery." I sipped my coffee, letting his words settle. "What would you choose?" I asked. He smiled. "That's not my decision to make. But I'll tell you this. Hopkins is a fellowship. It's temporary, finite. This chief position? It's a legacy. 20 years from now, surgeons you trained will be saving lives. Techniques you developed will be standard practice. That's immortality, in a way." That evening, I drove out to Long Island to visit the little girl from Thanksgiving. Her name was Emma, and she was being transferred to a rehabilitation facility the next day. Her parents, David and Lisa, had asked if I could stop by before she left. When I walked into her room, Emma was sitting up in bed, coloring. Her blonde hair had been washed and braided, and though she was still pale and thin, there was color in her cheeks that hadn't been there a week ago. "Dr. Chen," she said, brightening. "Look, I drew you a picture." She held up a crayon drawing of what appeared to be me in scrubs, standing next to a hospital bed. A rainbow arched overhead, and stars filled the sky. "It's beautiful," I said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Is that me?" "You saved my life," she said matter-of-factly. "Mommy told me. She said you fixed my insides so I could get better. I just did my job, sweetie." Her mother approached, eyes glistening with tears. "We can never thank you enough, Dr. Chen. We almost lost her. If you hadn't been there." She couldn't finish the sentence. Her husband put his arm around her shoulders. "We'd like to do something," David said. "A donation to the hospital in your name, or maybe we could help fund your research. We want other families to have the chance we had. That's very generous, I said. Actually, if you're serious about helping, I might have an idea. Later that night, sitting in my apartment with Emma's drawing on my refrigerator, I made a list. On one side, I wrote Johns Hopkins Fellowship. On the other, Manhattan Memorial Chief Position. Under Johns Hopkins, I wrote, Prestige, Specialized Training, New Techniques, Expand Expertise, Personal Growth. Under Manhattan Memorial, I wrote, Leadership, Teaching, Build a Program, Direct Impact, Create Change, Emma. That last word sat there, heavy with meaning. Emma wasn't just a patient. She was a reminder of why I did this work. And there would be hundreds of Emmas if I stayed, thousands over the years. Each one a life saved, a family kept whole, a future made possible. But if I went to Hopkins, I'd become a better surgeon. I'd learn techniques that didn't exist yet. I'd push the boundaries of what was possible. Both options were right. That was the problem. My phone rang. It was Jennifer. Hey, she said, her voice tentative. I hope it's not too late to call. It's fine. What's up? I just wanted to say again how sorry I am. About everything. I've been thinking a lot about what you said at Mom's party. Me too. Can I ask you something? How did you do it? How did you not let us break you down? I sat back on my couch, considering the question. I almost did let you break me, I admitted. There were nights I'd come home and cry because I felt so worthless, so invisible. But then I'd go to work and someone would need me. Really need me. And I realized that your opinion of my body mattered so much less than my ability to save a life. Once I understood that, it got easier. I'm teaching my daughter differently, Jennifer said. After hearing you talk, I realized how much toxic stuff I was absorbing and passing on. She's 3, and I never want her to think her value is in being thin or pretty. I want her to know she can be a surgeon like her Aunt Sarah. I felt tears prick my eyes. That means more to me than you know. Have you decided about the job? I'm still thinking about it. For what it's worth, I think you should stay in New York. Be close to family. Let us be better. Let us show you that we've learned. After we hung up, I added one more word to the Manhattan Memorial list. Family. The week passed in a blur of surgeries, rounds, and endless deliberation. I talked to mentors, colleagues, even patients. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had advice. On Friday evening, I found myself back in the hospital chapel, a small, quiet space I'd discovered during my residency. I wasn't particularly religious, but something about the silence helped me think. I sat in a pew and closed my eyes, trying to quiet the noise in my head. What do I want? I asked myself. Not what should I do? Not what makes sense? Not what impresses people? What do I actually want? The answer came quietly but clearly. I wanted to build something. Not just become something. I wanted to create a program that changed lives, that trained surgeons who would carry forward a commitment to excellence and compassion. I wanted to be there when the next Emma arrived, and the one after that, and the one after that. Johns Hopkins would make me a better surgeon, but Manhattan Memorial would let me create better surgeons. That was the difference. On Monday morning, I walked into Dr. Hoffman's office at 9 o'clock sharp. I've made my decision, I said. I want the chief position. I want to build something here. Her face broke into a genuine smile. I was hoping you'd say that. Welcome aboard, Chief Chen. We shook hands, and just like that, my life shifted into a new chapter. The news spread through the hospital quickly. Congratulations came from every direction. Dr. Morrison pulled me aside and hugged me, something he'd never done in 5 years. You made the right choice, he said. Now go change the world. That afternoon, I called Johns Hopkins and politely declined their fellowship offer. The director understood. If you ever change your mind, the door's open, he said. But I have a feeling you're exactly where you need to be. That evening, I drove back to Westchester County for a family dinner. This time, it was at my mother's house, a smaller gathering with just the immediate family. When I walked in, I was greeted with genuine warmth. No judgmental looks, no comments about my appearance, just family, imperfect and learning, trying to do better. Over dinner, I shared my news about the chief position. The room erupted in congratulations, and this time, it felt real. My mother raised her glass. To Sarah, she said, not just for her incredible achievement, but for teaching us all what real strength looks like. I'm so proud of the woman you've become. We clinked glasses, and I felt something I hadn't felt at a family gathering in years. Belonging. After dinner, Kyle approached me shyly. Aunt Sarah, can I ask you something? Of course. I want to be a doctor someday. Like you. Will you help me? I looked at this kid who had asked the cruelest question just a few weeks ago, now looking at me with admiration and hope. I'd be honored, I said. And Kyle? Thank you. For what? For giving me a chance to teach you that people are so much more than how they look. That's a lesson that's going to serve you well. He nodded, understanding in his young eyes. As I drove home that night, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The years of being overlooked and underestimated. The comments and the judgments, the determination to prove my worth not to them, but to myself. They'd laughed at me for being fat at that family dinner. They'd seen only my body and missed everything else. But I'd shown them, and more importantly, I'd shown myself, that worth isn't measured in pounds or reflected in mirrors. It's measured in lives saved, in minds shaped, in the courage to stand up and demand to be seen for who you really are. And I was just getting started. 6 months later, on a humid July evening, I stood in the conference hall at Manhattan Memorial Hospital, looking out at 200 faces. Medical students, residents, attending physicians, nurses, hospital administrators, and guests from other institutions had gathered for the inaugural Manhattan Memorial Pediatric Trauma Symposium. My symposium. The one I'd spent the past 6 months planning. The weight I'd carried at Thanksgiving dinner was still there, maybe even a few pounds more. The stress of launching a new program, reorganizing a department, and establishing myself as the youngest chief in the hospital's history hadn't left much time for gym sessions or carefully planned meals. But as I stood at that podium, wearing a professional dress that fit my body exactly as it was, I felt something I'd never felt before, complete and absolute confidence in who I was. Good evening, I began, my voice steady and clear. Welcome to the first annual Manhattan Memorial Pediatric Trauma Symposium. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, Chief of Pediatric Trauma Surgery, and I'm here to tell you that the future of pediatric trauma care is being written right now, in this moment, by the surgeons and medical professionals in this room. The audience was attentive, engaged. In the front row sat Dr. Morrison, beaming like a proud father. Next to him was Dr. Hoffman, the CEO who had believed in me. And scattered throughout the audience were members of my family. My mother, my brother, Jennifer with her husband, Uncle Robert, Aunt Margaret, and even Kyle, now 14 and seriously considering pre-med programs. But the person I kept glancing at was sitting in the third row, Emma. She was 9 now, healthy and energetic, recovering so completely that you'd never know she'd been hours from death just 7 months ago. Her parents had become major donors to the hospital, funding a new research initiative in pediatric trauma care. The Emma Initiative, we called it. Every child deserves a chance to be saved, and we're going to make sure they get it. Over the next hour, I presented our department's achievements. We'd reduced pediatric trauma mortality rates by 18%. We'd trained 15 new residents in advanced techniques. We'd published 3 groundbreaking papers on innovative surgical approaches. We'd established partnerships with 5 other hospitals to share knowledge and improve outcomes across the region. But more than statistics, I talked about what really mattered. The children who went home to their families. The parents who got to watch their kids grow up. The futures that were made possible because when someone was dying, we were ready. I introduced several members of my team, each one a talented surgeon who shared my commitment to excellence. I presented cases, showed video of new techniques, and opened the floor for questions. The engagement was electric. This was what medicine should be: collaboration, innovation, constant improvement. As the formal presentation concluded, I added one final thought. When I was offered this position, I had a choice to make. I could continue on a path of personal achievement, becoming the best surgeon I could be. Or I could choose a different path, building something bigger than myself, creating a program that would outlive me and continue saving lives long after I'm gone. I chose the latter, not because personal achievement isn't important, but because I realized that the greatest legacy we can leave isn't what we accomplish individually. It's what we enable others to accomplish. I paused, letting the words settle. I want to end with something personal. 7 months ago, I sat at a family dinner where I was judged, mocked, and dismissed because of my appearance. People I loved made assumptions about my worth based on how I looked rather than who I was or what I'd achieved. That night hurt. It hurt deeply. The room was silent now. I could see my mother's eyes filling with tears. But that night also changed me. It forced me to confront a truth I'd been avoiding, that I'd been seeking validation from people who were measuring me by the wrong standards. My worth as a surgeon, as a leader, as a human being, has nothing to do with my dress size. It has everything to do with my skills, my compassion, my dedication, and my willingness to show up when someone needs me. I'm standing here today, leading a department at one of the nation's top hospitals, at a size that society tells me is wrong. And I'm here to tell every person in this room, especially the young women who are just starting their medical careers, that your body does not determine your capability. Your weight does not limit your worth. Your appearance does not define your potential. What defines you is how you show up for your patients, how you push yourself to learn and grow, how you treat your colleagues with respect, how you handle the pressure when lives are on the line. That's what matters. That's all that matters. The applause started slowly, then built into a standing ovation. I saw medical students with tears in their eyes. I saw seasoned surgeons nodding in agreement. I saw my family on their feet, clapping loudly, their faces reflecting pride and perhaps a bit of understanding for how far I'd had to climb to reach this moment. After the symposium, there was a reception. I was surrounded by people wanting to talk about research, about collaboration, about opportunities. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. Eventually, I found a quiet moment in a corner with my mother. "That was beautiful," she said. "Everything you said. I'm so sorry that I ever made you feel like you needed to be anything other than exactly who you are." I hugged her. "You're learning. We're all learning. Your father would have been so proud. Not because you're a chief surgeon, but because you're brave enough to be yourself even when it's hard." Jennifer approached with her 3-year-old daughter, Sophie, holding her hand. "Sophie, say hi to Aunt Sarah." The little girl looked up at me with curious eyes. "You're a doctor?" "I am. I help fix people when they're hurt. Mommy says you save kids." "I try my best." Jennifer smiled. "I show her pictures of you in your scrubs. I tell her that girls can be anything they want to be, and they don't have to be skinny to be successful. That's the best thing you could teach her." Later, as the crowd thinned, Emma and her parents found me. "Dr. Chen," David said, "we wanted you to have something." Emma held out a framed photo. It was the crayon drawing she'd made of me in the hospital, the one with the rainbow and stars, but they'd had it professionally mounted and matted. "We thought you might want this for your new office," Lisa said. "It's perfect," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." Emma looked up at me with those bright eyes that almost hadn't gotten a chance to see 9 years old. "You're my hero, Dr. Chen. And you're mine, Emma. You fought so hard to live. That's the bravest thing anyone can do." Driving home that night, I thought about the journey from that Thanksgiving dinner to this moment. 7 months. In some ways, it felt like a lifetime. In other ways, it felt like the blink of an eye. The invitation to the family dinner that had started everything sat in a drawer at home. I'd kept it as a reminder, not of the pain, but of the turning point. That night had forced me to confront truths about myself and my family that needed to be confronted. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Morrison. "Exceptional presentation tonight. The program is in the best possible hands." Another text came from Johns Hopkins, from the fellowship director. "Saw the live stream of your symposium. You made the right choice staying in New York. You're building something special." And finally, one from Kyle. "That was cool. I definitely want to be a surgeon now. Can I shadow you sometime?" I smiled, typing back, "Anytime. But fair warning, The hours are terrible, and the scrubs aren't flattering on anyone. His response, I don't care what I look like. I care about saving lives like you do. There it was. The next generation, learning the right lessons. Understanding that medicine isn't about appearance or conforming to societal standards. It's about skill, dedication, and compassion. When I got home, I hung Emma's drawing in my living room, right next to my medical degree. Two different kinds of achievement, but equally meaningful. One represented what I'd earned through years of study and sacrifice. The other represented why it all mattered. I changed into comfortable clothes and sat on my couch with a cup of tea, finally allowing myself to feel the exhaustion of the past 6 months. Building a program from the ground up while proving myself as a leader had been harder than any surgery I'd ever performed. But I'd done it. Not in spite of my body, but with it. This body that society judged, that my family had mocked, that I'd sometimes hated, had carried me through 70-hour weeks, through complex surgeries, through the challenge of establishing myself as a leader in a competitive field. This body was strong. It was capable. It was enough. My phone rang one last time. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Dr. Chen, this is Rachel Wang. I'm a second-year medical student at Columbia. I was at your symposium tonight. Hello, Rachel. What can I do for you? I just wanted to thank you. Her voice wavered with emotion. I've been thinking about dropping out of medical school. I'm overweight, and I've faced so much discrimination from professors, from other students, even from patients. I started believing that maybe I wasn't cut out for this because of how I look. She paused, collecting herself. But hearing you speak tonight, seeing what you've accomplished, it gave me hope. It reminded me why I wanted to be a doctor in the first place. So thank you. You probably hear this all the time, but you changed my life tonight. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her words. Rachel, I said carefully, it's going to be hard. Some people will judge you. Some will underestimate you. Some will make cruel comments disguised as concern for your health. But here's what I need you to understand. Medicine needs diverse voices. It needs doctors who understand discrimination because they've experienced it. It needs people who can see past the surface to the person underneath. Don't let anyone tell you that your body disqualifies you from this career. Your brain, your hands, your heart, those are what matter. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, understanding with complete clarity why I'd chosen to stay in New York, why I'd taken on the chief position, why I'd shared my story publicly. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every Rachel out there, every talented person who'd been told they didn't fit the mold, every brilliant mind trapped in a body that society deemed wrong. They needed to see that it was possible, that you could be excellent and exist in a larger body, that your worth wasn't determined by a number on a scale or the size of your clothes. The next morning, I woke up to my alarm at 5:30, the same as always. I put on my scrubs, pulled my hair back, and headed to the hospital for morning rounds. There were patients to check on, residents to teach, a department to lead. As I walked through the hospital corridors, people greeted me with respect. Not because I'd changed physically, but because they'd finally learned to see past the surface. Or maybe I'd finally learned to demand that they see past it. In the pediatric ward, I checked on a 7-year-old boy who'd come in 2 days ago with internal injuries from a bicycle accident. He was recovering well, his parents exhausted but grateful beside his bed. Is he going to be okay? His mother asked, the same question every parent asks, the one that carries the weight of the world. He's going to be fine, I assured her. He's strong, and he fought hard. Kids are incredibly resilient. She squeezed my hand. Thank you, doctor. Thank you for saving my son. Walking away from that room, I thought about how many times I'd heard those words over the years. Thank you for saving my child. 4 words that made every sacrifice worthwhile. Every missed holiday, every sleepless night, every cruel comment endured. This was my purpose. This was my legacy. Not the weight I carried on my body, but the lives I held in my hands. They'd laughed at me for being fat at that family dinner 7 months and a lifetime ago. They'd seen only what society had trained them to see, a body that didn't conform, a woman who didn't fit the mold. But I'd shown them something else entirely. I'd shown them that excellence doesn't have a size requirement, that leadership looks like many different bodies, that the hands that save lives don't need to be attached to a figure that fits magazine standards. I'd shown them, and more importantly, I'd shown myself. And now, standing in this hospital in my scrubs with Emma's drawing waiting for me at home and Rachel's voice still echoing in my mind, I understood something fundamental. The journey wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. Right that I belonged here. Right that I was capable. Right that my worth was intrinsic, unchangeable, not subject to anyone's approval or disapproval. I was Dr. Sarah Chen, Chief of Pediatric Trauma Surgery at Manhattan Memorial Hospital. I was a surgeon who saved lives, a leader who built programs, a teacher who inspired the next generation. And I was all of those things exactly as I was. That was the real victory. Not changing their minds, but freeing myself from needing them to change at all. As I walked into my office, ready to start another day of the work I loved, I looked at the photo on my wall. Not Emma's drawing, but a picture from the symposium. Me at that podium, confident and powerful, speaking my truth. I looked at that photo and smiled. They'd laughed at me for being fat, but I'd had the last laugh by refusing to let their laughter define me, and that made all the difference. If this story touched you, moved you, or changed something in how you see yourself or others, I want to hear about it. Leave a comment telling me your biggest takeaway. And please, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is remind someone else that they are enough, exactly as they are. Subscribe for more stories that matter. And remember, you are so much more than what others see. You are everything you choose to become.